Hello, good morning, greetings from Chiang Mai. Beautiful sunny day here. So today I wanted to introduce briefly a methodology I've been working on of trying to really focus in on how I encounter the environment in a more somatic way, like a bodily way. And I came up with this practice which I call Klewes, based on the Cornish or kernewek word Klewes, which means to hear, to sense, to feel, to perceive. So it's a very deep form of listening that I've been turning into an actual practice of encountering a site of composition in order to meditate or think about how we as human beings encounter our environment. So I've written a short 500-word blog post about that. I'm going to read out the blog post, take a break every now and then to expand on some ideas. Okay, let's get into it. When I first began formulating the ideas that would eventually become my concept of mesotopia, I needed a way to describe the strange middle ground where perception, place, and meaning fold into one another. I sensed that our encounters with the world happen both out there and in here, but identifying with any kind of precision that place between out there and in here would require contemplation of both the psychological and somatic techniques involved in meaning making. Hence, my ongoing research into psy-omatic practice. Before working on my thesis, I'd been playing with a method that helped me navigate that in-between space with more precision. That practice is what I now call Klewes. Klewes is a word from kernewek, the Cornish language, meaning to hear, think, feel, perceive. The word immediately resonated with me. Its definition already gestures beyond the narrow sense of hearing and toward a fuller, more embodied mode of knowing. I realized that what I needed was a practice of attending that begins with the body's capacity to listen, not just with the ears, but with everything capable of sensing vibration. I wasn't seeking a metaphor. I wanted a method, so Klewes became the name for that method. Just to take a little break there. So what I was doing when I was initially playing around with this about how do I get into a site of composition, I would quite often close my eyes because, like I said, I didn't want a visual representation of the environment I was composing about, because I do think that quite often as human beings, we naturally use our oculocentric or our visual-based mediums to represent our relationship to our environment. And of course, that's just one of our senses. And it is a very good sense, obviously, and it does give us a lot of information. But also I wanted us to, like, as poets or meaning makers or people working with any kind of somatic practices, I wanted to get out of relying too much on the eyes. Okay, so when I was relearning Cornish and I started to look at the word Klewes again, I was thinking, oh, well, that's kind of what Klewes means. It doesn't just mean to hear. It actually means a lot more than just hearing, right? So back to the blog. The procedure is simple, but the effects can be disarming. When I arrive at a site of composition, whether a field, a coastal path, an abandoned industrial corner, or a patch of woodland, I lie down. I close my eyes. I take long, slow breaths for about 15 minutes, sometimes a bit more, until my attention begins to settle. With my vision removed from the foreground, something else starts to happen. The body reorients itself. The ground becomes not a surface beneath me, but a resonant partner. Vibrations travel upward, small tremors, shifting pressures, the faint hum of heat working its way through soil and stone. In these moments, I begin to hear with the back of my skull, with my ribs, with the folds of clothing touching the ground. This is what I mean by listening in the expanded field. The point of Klewes isn't to romanticize nature or to retreat into some meditative cocoon. It's a deliberate unsettling of the visual habits that dominate our encounters with place. Modern life, and even much of ecological thinking, leans heavily on the eye, the view, the image, the landscape. Vision often leads to a sense of distance, reinforcing an eye over here, observing a world over there. That separation underpins an anthropocentric way of relating, one in which the human becomes the sole interpreter of meaning. When I practice Klewes, I don't begin with seeing, I begin with hearing. The sight arrives first as vibration, pressure, pulse. Instead of interpreting the place, I let the place impress itself upon me. Hearing, expanded into feeling, becomes a way of entering into relation without assuming that what I see defines what is there. I found that this shifts the entire tone of composition. Rather than imposing structure onto the sight, I allow the sight to tune me. The thinking, composing, or writing that follows carries traces of that initial ear-led encounter. It is quieter, more porous, and more situated. Klewes is ultimately an invitation to hear our way into place, to perceive without rushing to picture, and to recognize that the world meets us long before we claim to look at it. As always, miath ka. So as you can see, what I'm trying to do here is to really think about this process of meaning making, which then underpins language making, or the poetic process, or lyrical inquiry, as I want to call it. So when I talk about the field or the site of composition, I'm talking about my immediate environment. And that doesn't have to be a cliff or a coast. It could be an urban environment. But what I'm trying to get us to do is to step out of just relying completely on our eyes and really go back into our bodies and listen to the world. Now, like I said, I'm not the first person to do this. There's things like forest bathing. There's Dadari, the Aboriginal approach to doing this. So I'm not appropriating cultural things either. I mean, this practice is coming from my understanding or my interpretation of what the Cornish word Klewes actually is or means. So I'm retrieving a word from the Cornish language or kernewek language, and really thinking about what that means about our relationship to our environment and how that can help us, how that linguistic kind of framing can actually be a somatic practice which helps us understand our environment in a very different, non-ocular-centric, non-anthropocentric way. So I've put links to the original blog post and to my thesis where I expand on a lot of these ideas more. I will be posting some more about this and psy-omatics and my other understanding of other somatic or psychological processes moving forward. Hope you have a great day and see you next week. Thank you very much.